Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Free. I'm Ryan, and I'm the pastor here, and it's so good to be with you on this Thursday night. I can't wait for y'all to. I'm so glad you're here. I can't wait for y'all to hear what's going to happen tonight, and I'm glad you're tuning in. By the way, if you're new with us, we are a community for addicts, loved ones of addicts, and spiritual refugees. And here's the deal: we have been in this series called The Grudge, where we've been looking at how to put things down, how to unload the burdens, what it means to take violence and pain out of the vicious cycle, to take it out of circulation so that we can actually get to a place of forgiveness. So tonight, Mariah Lucas is going to be with us. Now, I want to tell you how I know Mariah and when I was first introduced to Mariah. It was last year. Tammy, my wife, and I were watching. We were so excited to watch this series. It was on CNN. It was called the Redemption Project. Some of y'all might have seen it. I believe it was 8 episodes. Mariah's story was the first episode. And y'all, I'm telling you, we watched this. It was a Sunday night. I'll never forget it because I was in tears most of the evening. I didn't sleep that night. Her story was so impactful for me. It's the story of her forgiveness and redemption with the man who murdered her mother. So I reached out to Mariah at some point after this episode. We've stayed in contact, and Mariah is joining us tonight. I can't wait for y'all to hear this story. Like I said, we've been in this series where we've dealt with forgiveness. And if you think you've got some heaviness on your heart, you think it's been a big deal that your friend didn't call you back, or you're in some sort of squabble with your neighbor, I want you to hear this story of forgiveness and redemption because it might help put some things into perspective for you. So here's a little 90-second video of part of the story you're going to hear tonight, but let's watch that. Then Mariah is going to join us. And if y'all have questions along the way, I encourage you to put them in the comments. We will try to engage your questions along the way. And as always, like we do with every storyteller, Mariah is willing to engage your questions throughout the evening after this interview. So ask away, type away. Y'all do your thing like you do. And take a look at this little 90-second video, then we'll come back.
Jason Wayne Clark. Your name has been in my mind for the last 20 or so years. I have thought about you nearly every week of my life, and I have many questions for you. I finally decided to reach out. I'd had hopes you would be willing to meet me. My name is Mariah Lucas, the daughter of Charlene Heineman, the woman you killed.
After the first paragraph, I had to put it down. It was like a slug to the chest. I had to put it down. I couldn't believe what I was holding in my hand. 23 years of no contact from anybody.
I realize that my contacting you may come as a surprise. I want to tell you a little about myself and the life that I have lived.
She told me about her life and the things that she had been through. It's what we call the cycle of violence. I went through a cycle of violence, and my actions started another cycle of violence that she had to live through. And she was the one that broke that cycle of violence.
I would like to ask that you would allow me to come visit you.
At the end of that letter, she had told me to forgive myself. And that hit me harder than anything else. It was unreal.
Hey, Mariah, thank you for being with us this evening.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, we're just going to jump into things here. Mariah, can you give us a little bit of the backstory of the night your mom was killed? And I know you were young. You were, I think, 15 months old. Is that right? 15 months old when
Yeah.
this happened. How did this traumatic event, how did it impact you as you got older?
Well, first of all, I was 15 months old, so I don't really have a whole lot of recollection of that night or the events. Only thing I know is what I've been told, which varying stories. But for the most part, my mom was trying to run away from my father, who was really abusive. Um, she had gotten into drugs and stuff before she had gotten killed. Jason, the man that actually murdered her, she had a drug debt with, and that night he was running away from one of his usual Johns. He, prostituted himself to get by, to get the drugs and everything. And he came across my mom in the situation that he was in. Tensions rose and a fight ensued, and one thing led to another, and he stabbed her and shoved her back in the car and used her car where she was sleeping as a getaway. Just really violent and brutal. Um, and that situation, losing my mom at such a young age, and because my father was still out in society, my brother and I got to go live with my dad, who was involved with drugs himself, was attracted to younger girls. And I use the word girls because none of them were over the age 18. So I was thrusted into this life of violence and drugs and um, essentially child sex trafficking. My dad's girlfriend at the time, who ended up having two kids with, was 15, and her mom sold her to my dad for drugs. And that was kind of the lifestyle that I knew from the time that my mom was killed to the time that I turned 7. Um, at which point, my father got into physical altercation with one of his drug dealers, and it ended up in him going to prison, and my brother and I going to live with his brother, so our uncle. Um, which my uncle was never addicted to drugs, as far as I'm aware, but what he was addicted to was money and power. And what had started off as sexual and physical abuse in my dad's home transpired into physical abuse, neglect, isolation. Um, what we had in money and things, we lacked 10 some in love and affection and nurturing environments. And it was, in my mind, it was like the easy way out was to have the things, to not question where food and water was going to come from. I always had shoes on my feet and clothes on my back. But like the simple things that children need, that loving and nurturing environment, like, I love you, I'm proud of you, like, I'm going to hug you and not expect anything physical from you in return. Those things weren't present in my childhood. So it kind of created this environment where if I wanted something, I had to give of myself something that really, I wasn't really capable of giving. Um, and because of the environment that I grew up in and the sexual assault and the abuse, um, when I was a teenager, my cousin actually started raping me and used my housing, my food, and my the roof over my head as basically a muzzle to keep me quiet, and said that if you want to keep living comfortably, then you're going to keep your mouth shut, essentially. So that was just kind of the cycle of violence that I was thrown into because of that, because of her murder. And that was just like the physical, real sense of it. We don't understand always the mental, shift that comes from having to go through all of that, which I didn't really understand or even was even really capable of digging into until I was an adult and unfortunately a mother myself, to be able to kind of dig through those burdens and those traumas. I really didn't understand what I had lost as a child until I had a little baby myself, and I was just like, all of these milestones and all of these firsts, um, I was able to experience them through my kid, but then I had lost. I remember like the gravity of what I had lost losing my mom.
So, Mariah, can you talk a little bit about because oftentimes when we're dealing with situations of forgiveness, and when you're talking about a life of trauma started by one action, but then it just kind of trauma followed for many years.
Mhm.
What was the thing that happened, or was there a single event in your life, or what was the thing that led you to, as we saw in the video clip, you reached out and wrote Jason a letter while he was in prison, and you said, "Hey, I want to meet with you." And what was it in you, or what happened in your life to make you say, "I'm at the place where I want to begin some sort of process of forgiveness"? How'd you arrive to that point?
I think it was a series of events actually. Life has a funny way of working. My brother and I were super close growing up, and a series of unfortunate events actually led to our falling out, and I didn't have a relationship with him and didn't really have a relationship with anybody in my family except for my husband. Um, we basically built everything that we have from the ground up. And prior to being with my husband, and even probably the first like 2 or 3 years of our marriage, I was a really angry and spiteful person. In my work, we use the phrase hurt people hurt people. And it was very much the case for me. I did not know how to handle my trauma. I did not know how to handle my triggers. Despite being in several different methods of therapy, I was still um, lashing out at people that I cared about. And unfortunately, my husband took a lot of that pain and the brunt of my abuse, really, because that's what happens when we don't deal with trauma. We give that hurt that we're experiencing and we give it to the people that we love and care about. And um, I got really sick in 2015. Something super simple, and it should have been a quick in and out. I ended up getting my wisdom teeth removed. Um, and within 24 hours, I was septic. Um, And if you guys don't know what that means, basically my blood was poisonous to my body, and I had to go through several emergency surgeries, and I ended up in a coma on life support. And I have a very vivid memory of um, seeing my mom and losing her as a child. I never really had vivid memories of her. I think I have maybe 4 or 5 pictures of her in totality. So, like seeing her in the human form, at least it seemed like that. And she didn't say anything to me. She just smiled and shook her head, and then I like woke up in the hospital bed, and to me that was kind of like affirmation that I wasn't really done with my journey here on earth. I'd always been a really spiritual person, um, but that was something that I couldn't make sense of. And the doctors let me know that they had lost my heartbeat. I had to be pedaled back to life. Um, but I like that was confirmation that like whatever you're doing, you need to keep pushing forward. You need to keep moving forward because there's so much more for you to do in this world.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was going to school. My plan was to be an FBI profiler. I'd always been um, into criminal justice and addictions and crime rates and things of that nature. And I really wanted to understand why people committed crimes. I wanted to understand what made us do the things that we do that end up hurting another person, what makes us capable of being able to harm somebody. Um, and when I got out of the hospital, I had a PIC line for a month. It wasn't like a smooth sailing exit from the hospital and from that like sick moment, but it ended up transpiring into something really amazing. And I found the article of my mom's murder and the court trials and stuff, and I had known Jason Clark's name, but I never really knew anything about him. I didn't know his past. I just knew that he ran in the same circle as my mom's brother. And so I started digging into that. And it took me I got out of the hospital in December. It took me from January to when all my medications and stuff were done to July to write this 6-page front and back letter to him because I kept
Oof.
starting over, right? Like, what do you say to a person who took your mom? What are the right words? And so I started over a bunch of times, and it ended up coming down to this man really needs to know what he took from me and the life that I'd lived and the abuse that I went through. But he also needs to know that he didn't ruin me,
Mm.
because if he had ruined me, that would have been me giving him that power. So I wanted him to know that, yeah, I had a really shitty life as a child. I went through some terrible, terrible things, but I was able to come out of it as a stronger person. And
So, Mariah,
I
can you just briefly tell us what was that moment like when? So he received the letter, but then I'm assuming you all had a conversation either over the phone or in person for the first time. No.
no.
So what was it
So
like the first
he
time you met him?
so he received the letter. Obviously, in the state of California, well, pretty much anywhere, you cannot reach out to your victim ever. Your survivor is nothing. So he actually gave the letter to a couple different people he was working with in prisons, and one of those people was Javier Starring. And Javier founded an organization in California called Healing Dialogue and Action, and he reached out to me and was like, "I have never seen somebody of their own free will reach out to their offender and want to make amends on their own. Um, let's work together." And then Van Jones, the CNN commentator who actually narrates our documentary, was like, "Hey, Javier, like, do you know anybody who would be willing to go inside prisons and do this thing?" And he's like, "Actually, I've got someone that I'm working with right now that really wants to, and we're just trying to change the law in California to make this something that can happen." I actually didn't meet Jason until the moment you guys see on camera.
Hmm.
Um, it was December 21st. It was so crazy, everything leading up to it. We didn't even get approval by the California State Correctional System until 3 hours before Jason and I met. Like, that's how down to the wire it was, because what we did changed the entire system. That's not something that happens in California, anywhere really. You can't just go and meet your victim or your survivor, because there's the way that our system is set up, it's like it doesn't make room for amends. So I didn't meet Jason until the moment that you all see on camera. And that hug that you see in the documentary was actually the first like contact we had. As soon as I walked into the room, I could sense like his fear and his anxiety. And I guess it's the mom in me or just the healer in me. I walked up to him, and the first thing that I did was give him a hug because I wanted him to know that he was safe and that I wasn't there to hurt him. So that was actually our first actual contact, was that
All right.
hug on camera in front of everybody.
We have a question from Leslie. I want to come back to that moment, but Leslie said, "Did you recognize these cycles when you were in them, or later during reflection?" So the I think she's talking about the when you were talking a moment ago about these unhealthy cycles you were finding yourself in. When did you
Mhm.
recognize these?
Honestly, I think I probably recognized them early in my adulthood. Um, so I actually had a child with my high school sweetheart. And when he came back from Iraq, he was different and he had some issues that he wasn't really ready to work through, and it caused a lot of contention with us. We were in a domestic violence relationship, we were physical with each other, and he had made some comments that were threatening to my life essentially. And I remember carrying my 1 month old child at the time and thinking, I am in the same situation that my mother was in. And if I don't do something about this now, I'm going to end up this like in the same
Mhm.
outcome. And that was when it really clicked
Mm.
that, like, what are you doing, Mariah? You are putting yourself in this situation, and how do we get out of that? And so that was what started like the mind changing the gears. But I mean, from that moment of wow, where am I? What am I doing? It still took 2 to 3 years to get out of that environment, at least fully, to where I was in a relationship with my husband, married in a healthy way, in a healthy relationship, learning about therapy for the first time. So I think
You
I was
know,
18 when I started.
and when we're talking about the things that make for healing, when we're talking about forgiveness, I like to remind people that this isn't the stuff that happens overnight. And for any of you who have experienced forgiveness in your life, when you needed to forgive someone or people or something in your life, it's often well, I think it's always a process, and it's often a long, drawn out process. So, Mariah, will
Yeah.
you help us understand not just the moment of hugging him and what a powerful moment that would have been, but what did that process of forgiveness look like for you, and where did you experience healing within yourself or healing with Jason? And I know that you all have since you've done some work together, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But first, I'd like you to address that process of forgiveness and what that was like.
So, that process was more for me than it was for anybody else.
Hmm.
Um, my family still very much carries that burden. They're still very much angry, and a lot of them are still dabbling in the use of drugs and alcohol and things of that nature. And I saw the pain that they carried, and it was kind of like it's been 20 something years for them now, and they still blame Jason for every little thing that goes wrong in their life. And I remember at a point blaming my dad and my uncle for everything that I was experiencing, even though they weren't directly involved with any of it at that point. And I was like, it was kind of like a momentary aha moment where I was like, why am I giving them that power when they're living life just fine? You know, they have relationships and children and jobs and tribes and communities that they're able to connect with. Why am I the one that's holding on to that? Why am I the one that feels the need to carry such a heavy burden? And so I had to start going through that process of forgiving because it was vital to my future and the way that I was going to raise my children and raise my family. If I carried that burden, I wouldn't have been any better than the people that had put me through that pain and that trauma
Yeah.
because I was allowing myself to re-victimize myself every single day by holding on to that hurt and holding on to that pain. And I don't know if you've noticed, but in the beginning stages of that documentary when they filmed that, I was 270 pounds. So not only did I let go of the mental and emotional turmoil
Mm.
that I allowed myself to go through every single day, I lost 100 pounds.
Good for you. Congratulations. Um,
That mental and
big.
emotional turmoil turned into physical ailments. And we
Yeah.
do it to ourselves when we just hold on
Yep.
to that anger. It's just as much of a disease as addiction,
Yeah.
as cancer. I mean, like it's a sickness. And as long as we're holding on to it, we're telling the universe and our spiritual system that it's okay and that that's who we are. And as
Yeah.
soon as we decide to let go of it, we open ourselves up to so much more beauty and
That's
grace and
beautiful.
compassion.
It's why here at Free, we always say that, forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. Forgiveness is about you being free. It's about you unloading the burden. And it doesn't matter if the other person owns their stuff or not. It doesn't matter if you get an apology from them. Forgiveness is when you are releasing that so that you no longer it no longer controls you. That stuff no longer consumes you, doesn't dictate your future, doesn't determine your next steps. And of anger, we
Absolutely.
say, it's like drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. It only hurts you, and it has nothing to do with the other person. So Marion asked, Do you think your reaction would have been the same if you'd been a little older and had gotten to know and love your mother?
Oh, Marion, that's a really good question. It's something
Yeah.
I've actually had to answer several different times. Um, and the easiest way to answer that is I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, I can't say whether or not that type of relationship would have changed my future or the outcome. Um, all I know is here and now and what I have experienced. So as much as I would love to answer this wholeheartedly, I've made a deal with myself and my spiritual guider that I would not look back at things like that. I wouldn't look at the what ifs and what could have been. I really like to focus in what is now. And I would like to think that the person that I am today would be just as forgiving because I would have had to go through the exact same trauma and pain to get to the point I am in my life today. So I know that doesn't really answer things fully for you, but it's what something that I've learned in my life and in my healing is I can't cling to those what ifs and
Hmm.
what could have been and stuff like that. We really have to focus on being present in our present day and planning for better futures. So I hope that kind of answers somewhat.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mariah. And just in kind of wrapping things up, can you explain to us how your life is different today? So you've done the hard work of the interior work of forgiveness and
Mhm.
working through the trauma and coming face to face with those things in your life. So working on the interiors and let people know what kind of healing work you're involved in with the world today, and maybe even say a word about. I know you and Jason have done some work together. So just tell us how you're involved in it all. How's your life different today?
Yeah, well, for starters, I am married. I've been with my husband almost 10 years next month. We have three absolutely beautiful children, which is amazing because I was always told I was never going to be able to have kids after experiencing the trauma I did as a child. So, God has plans. Jason and I, though COVID has kind of slowed things down, we do get to go into prisons every now and then and um, go into healing circles and be able to share our story. And it's really awesome because people see how close we are. Jason is one of my best friends. He's been super successful in the few years that he's been out of prison. Not even as much as a speeding ticket, he's been doing awesome. We work together. We're getting ready to do a couple social media programmings with his organization. He actually is one of the program directors with Healing Dialogue and Action Now. Um, and I do have my degree in criminal justice. I got a degree in counseling. I utilize that in my own business now. I am actually a life coach and embodiment breathwork facilitator. I help people realign their chakras and dive into a spiritual connection with themselves and the universe. Um, that's kind of like my way of giving back now. I do a total mind, body, soul healing program that just kind of helps people find their peace, find their way in this big crazy world. Um, so yeah, I have a awesome website that just went live. Getting ready to open up a program for anybody interested, which thank you guys for tuning in tonight. If you are here watching this free live Q&A here and you want to get involved in my program, check out my website. I'm offering $200 off the program for anybody who's a member of free who watched this tonight. It's a 7-week chakra realignment program. Um, we go through stones and sage and all of our chakras, the imbalances, what impacts those imbalances have on our life, and how we can realign even in a moment. Um, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Just total mind, body, soul, health, healing. I'm kind of a hippie when it comes to it. I believe in essential oils and meditation and yoga. So it's awesome.
We have a hippie in the house. How about that? So, Mariah, if people do want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Should they connect with you on Facebook? Should they go to your website? If y'all missed it, her website is thelighthouseindustries.com. It's on the screen for you. Mariah, what's the best way if people are struggling with forgiveness, or they're struggling with trauma in their life, and knowing how to deal with all that? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
You can email me at thelighthouseindustries@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram at the Lighthouse Industries, or on my website. It gives a little bit of a synopsis of my program and what the Lighthouse Industries is, and there's also a contact form there. And I usually get back to people within a 24-hour period, so super quick turnaround. Um, you can Google me, honestly. You could just throw Mariah Lucas into Google and all sorts of communication forums come up. So it's really, really easy.
Well, so in closing, Mariah, I'm wondering if you could give people, um, and I didn't ask you this beforehand. I'm just kind of throwing it on you. But for those struggling with any of the things you've talked about tonight, forgiveness, redemption, the interiors, trauma, if you left them with one sentence, if you could look at them in the look in their eyes at the camera to the one who's struggling, what would you tell them?
Ooh, putting me on the spot. If you could have a conversation with God about what you're going through right now, how would He speak to you?
Hmm.
And could you speak to yourself the same way?
Wow. Thank you for that, Mariah. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Again, if you all have questions for Mariah, if you want to connect with her, she let me know that she would be hanging around online on this Facebook feed. So ask your questions away, interact with Mariah there. If you want to connect with her, go to her website. Thank you so much for being with us, Mariah. Anytime you're in Denver, I know you're coming to us from Dallas or the Dallas area. You're welcome here. And my wife Tammy just let me know she wants to see your shirt. Apparently, you're wearing a coffee shirt.
Yes, I wore this shirt just for Tammy. It says coffee,
Coffee,
lots of
lots of
coffee.
coffee. All right, Tammy loves it. She loves it. All right, thanks
I'm
again,
kind of a
Mariah.
coffee snob, so
Well, hey, you would fit in here at Free then because we have the best coffee in the entire universe. How's that?
well, I'm gonna have to come out and try a cup.
All right. Well, you're always welcome
Bye.
here if you're ever in Denver. And hey, thank you all so much for being part of this community, free spiritual community. If you want to know more about us and if you want to know more about what we do every single Saturday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, right here and on our YouTube page, check out our website, freespiritualcommunity.com. I encourage you to check it out. If you have questions about who we are and what we do, you can find our contact info there. Shoot me a message, shoot me an email. I would love to connect with you. And I do hope to see you all this Saturday night, 7 p.m. It's going to be good. I can't wait to see you all then. So much grace and peace in your life. If you are wrestling and struggling with the grudge, how to let go, how to let go of the painful things you have been holding on to, reach out to someone that you know has your back. Reach out to the people who are going to support you, the people that can walk with you, the people who are willing to walk with you. And that's exactly what we do here in this community. I say it every week, y'all. We don't do shame. We help pull one another back up. We pray for one another. We encourage one another. And we walk the hard stuff together. All right, y'all. We'll see you soon.